If the Democrats do wind up winning both Senate seats in Georgia, which again, one of the races is still too close to call, we want to make that clear, that would actually split the Senate evenly at 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans. Since the vice president gets the tie-breaking vote, that effectively will give the Democrats control of the House, Senate, and the White House on Inauguration Day. So what's that mean for you exactly? Well, President-elect Biden has promised to pass through the $2,000 stimulus that was blocked last week. We may remember in the Republican-controlled Senate. Now, there could also be some other money matters in play, including a possible push for a $15 federal minimum wage, higher taxes for people making more than $400,000 annually, student loan forgiveness, and rent relief.